Okay, now in this drawing, what I'm showing briefly here is the pelvic shift, and I've been kind of disappointed in some of the animal references that have movement in them. Some of these drawing manuals, they really don't show you the dynamics of what is happening to the forms. You know, a lot of times they use a Muybridge reference and everything looks stiff. There's no really an understanding of what's going on with those bones in that form. Well, in this case, if you know where the iliac crest is of the pelvis, you'll also know then the ischium bones, the butt bones. 2/3 of the way back from the iliac crest to the ischium generally is the femur. And this femur bone emerges from under the quads through the patella. You'll be able to see a little bulge there at the front of that leg up there in the, we'll call this area the haunches. Now in this rough form, all I've done is make like this pelvic block, and notice that if the animal is shifted his pelvis with the far side away from us, in other words his right hind leg is walking forward while the left hind leg is coming back, what you'll notice then, and I'm going to fill in these extensors and the gastrocnemius muscle emerging out from the semimembranosus and the bicep femoris. So now we get this little opening, the way this leg is coming out of that juncture. What you notice is the ischium bones, these little butt bones, are away from us. Okay, they're closed off. They follow the direction of the pelvis. Okay, they're bones, so they don't shift separate from this whole block. This is a fairly rigid area in terms of the pelvic to the ischium. Okay, so now we've got that understood. So I've got the animal in this case where his rear foot now is sort of stretched back, while the opposite leg behind is actually now going forward, and so we don't see much of this opening. It's sort of, when the animal's walking, it's going to shift because these legs are shifting, and that's going to create this whole pelvis area to be rocking to and from our point of view. Now, in this case, the left hind foot is extended back while the right bears the weight. As they come down here to the next drawing, we're going to shift those positions, and I'm going to show you now that with that same pelvic block, we have a slight different perspective. When the animal has now reached forward, going in that direction to the left, what we see here then is the entire ischium area with those ischium bones there. And if we take this pelvic block and divide it up, we're going to find that we can easily go back in perspective to find the anatomy going from the bicep femoris, the semitendinosus, and the gastrocnemius muscle as it merges out the rear of that juncture and becomes the Achilles tendon connecting to the calcaneus. And we have the extensors here and tarsus. Okay, that being said, we now see a whole different perspective of the way the pelvic shifts. Okay? And by knowing the landmark points, knowing where these bones are, knowing where these things make their plane changes, it helps you build a more dynamic, more natural kind of movement in your motion study, because you're not just drawing stiff wooden shapes on these animals, you're actually creating the dynamic and lively form and gesture. Okay, so now we have the right foot of the rear coming towards us. It's no longer weight bearing. Draw the little foot pad. Okay, but mostly what I wanted you to see was this. What is going on here? And if you look at the two, now you'll see there is a huge amount of movement in that pelvis. Okay, the weight-bearing side is slightly higher, and you have to go across that spine to the curve to find the other pelvis. And now look at, you see the ischium is no longer far away. It's kind of more open towards us. It's not closed off. We actually see this whole rear area that we didn't see before. And if you look at the two, you can see how that movement of that whole pelvis area would affect the dynamics of the drawing. So when you think of motion studies, you don't necessarily think of just legs moving around. You think about the dynamics of what's going on with the pelvis and the torso and the weight shift. Notice now that this weight-bearing leg has a sense that it's slightly higher, that pelvic curve, slightly higher than the dropped leg. And I would probably see the ischiums a little more, probably a little more canted like that, just a little bit, okay? And up here, we see now that the supporting leg is on the far side, so that side of the iliac crest would be slightly higher. Now you don't want to exaggerate these and make them look too hokey, but you do have to understand that the subtle dynamics can make a difference in the drawing.